Um, on regards to the liberals and Mark Carney, their new found savior, I think that Mark will probably give a better run for his money than Trudeau would. Give Pierre a better run for his money, because Mark at least is moderately compelling because Mark does come in with credentials rather than a clearly proven track record of failure over the last 10 years. It's like Mark can at least, be like, but that wasn't us. It wasn't me. It was that other guy, the Trudeau. It was him. It was that guy. It wasn't me. I was busy making the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England amazing. So I just think I think that he'll have a better run than Trudeau would have, but I think that he's on the clock because I think it's going to become really clear really quickly that he isn't significantly different from Trudeau, um, because either he was advising Trudeau and Trudeau's ideas were Mark's ideas, or Mark has had no impact on the Canadian economy so far, and in which case, what the hell was he doing? Right. So it's like I don't see how this will in the long run be a significant change. So I don't think that um, most people are going to buy into the Mark view over the Pierre view, because I also think that part of that is just that I think people are a little bit done with the liberals. I don't think this is just a Trudeau factor. It was just that Trudeau was the quintessential liberal of the leader. So I understand that they were a lot of F Trudeau signs going around, but I'm pretty sure the main sentiment is actually more like F the liberals. That like I think that zeroing in on Trudeau was a way to kind of not be saying F the liberals, if that makes sense. Like I like you might not like the Trudeau liberals, but in the past you might have liked the liberals, or you might like some of their policies, but you don't like Trudeau. Um, so you could get away with like being like F Trudeau, but it wasn't F the liberals. But I think the actual sentiment in most people's mind is like the liberals have done a bad job for multiple years. I don't want to deal with this anymore. I'm going to vote for the conservatives. And maybe they'll do a good job, maybe they'll do a bad job, but that's what we Canadians do. We pick between the red and the blue, and the red's been in too long and things are bad, so let's pick the blue. And I think that's really what's going to happen in the election.
I mean, to an extent, that's basically America as well, to an even larger extent, right? Yeah, I have some thoughts, but I'll save that for last. And I know Zillennial, you're dying to speak, so I'll pass the mic to you.
Thanks. Yeah, I just think the liberals, like usual, like which they have been under Trudeau, are just focused on labels, culture wars, and just like these purity tests. Just like they're doing the same thing. It's the same kind of playbook that the Democrats are doing. They're just like focusing on the things that alienated voters like me. They made people like me turn off from them. They're doing the exact same thing here in Canada. And they're also like they broadcasted like a year ago that their big game plan was that when Trump was running and the election happened, and if Trump won, they were going to use it kind of as a wedge issue by trying to point Pierre Poilievre as like another Trump, which doesn't work because Pierre Poilievre is nothing like Trump. He's a completely unique individual. So I just think that they're just doubling down on a strategy that people already hate them for. Like people already hate all these labels and he said this, she said this, like that kind of stuff. So it's just going to backfire. I mean, it might work for the time being because people are emotional about the tariff issue, but this is going to over time just backfire. In terms of Mark Carney, yeah, I guess there's going to be a little bit of a bump because he's the new guy and he's not Trudeau, so he has been able to paint himself as an outsider at the beginning, but like he's not an outsider. Everybody knows he's been advising not everyone, but it's well known that he's been advising Trudeau for a while, and I think he's probably just stealing some votes from the NDP, and he's getting a bit of that new guy bump. But I don't see the Conservatives really dropping below the low 40s, and that's enough for them to get a majority. So I just don't think it's going to move the needle. But I understand why the Liberals want to try.
I guess I'll add my thoughts and then we can move on to the last part of the story. So, yeah, my thoughts on the Canada First thing, I totally agree with pretty much what everyone else said here, that this like is a totally weird and like random way to go after Pierre, that it's totally not going to work. And it just goes to highlight how out of touch the Liberal Party is, or at least who's ever running the Liberal Party's official X account, which I think it's fair to say that that person speaks for the Liberal Party as a whole because they're running the official Liberal Party account, right? So I just think that it's really, it's not going to work, right? Like Canada First is such a, I don't want to say generic phrase, but it's the generic enough such that you can say it without being an alt-right person. Like, I'm not sure if the Liberal Party knows that. Like, a lot of people would agree with this Canada First agenda who are not alt-right fascists, who are not part of the Proud Boys or whatever. So yeah, it's just kind of weird. And I bring this story up partly also because I don't have like an example, but I've seen interviews in the past where the reporters would ask the Liberal MPs like, what are their kind of goals that they want to achieve? Why are they running to be an MP? And the Liberal Party MPs, a lot of them are like, oh, we're running to stop Pierre Poilievre's Make Canada Great Again campaign. And first of all, it's like, okay, Pierre, like that's an allusion to Trump's Make America Great Again, right? First of all, Pierre never ran on the slogan "Make Canada Great Again." I've never heard him actually say those exact words. And even if he did, they're implying, the Liberal MPs, they're basically implying that they don't want to make Canada great again, right? Like it's such a weird thing that we're running to be part of your government, and hopefully we can get in charge for a big majority government again, so that we can prevent someone from making Canada great again. And that's just like, I know the illusion is like, you know, Pierre is Trump and we don't want that in Canada. I know what they're trying to say, but on the surface level, it just seems so odd that they think that would be an appealing message, that we're running so that we can prevent Canada from being made great again. It's basically what they're saying, right? It is ridiculous. And I just think that, yeah, this is another example of how out of touch the Liberal Party is, that they think that Canada First is a Proud Boys slogan, even though it was first uttered by their most famous Prime Minister, Wilfrid Laurier, who's from their own party. Now, with regards to Mark Carney, yeah, I mean, he's been the chief economic advisor. I don't know how like official that role is, but he's been in the ear of Trudeau for years, right? At this point, and I just like everything that he's saying that he's gonna do once he's prime minister, he had an opportunity to do. Like he was very deeply connected with not only Justin Trudeau but the entire Liberal Party. That's why the entire cabinet of Justin Trudeau basically endorsed him. And it's like whatever he wants to get done, you can ask, why didn't you do it before when you had an opportunity for the past like 4 or 5 years since you were involved in government? And I don't think he can really give a good answer to that question, because again, he's had his opportunity, and look where we ended up, right? And he's just kind of running on this idea that I'm an outsider. I wasn't involved. I wasn't the prime minister. I might have been involved in the government and been Trudeau's advisor, but I wasn't, the final say on decisions. So I predict that a lot of that is going to be going on. And maybe some people will be convinced by that, but I just don't know if a large portion, if enough people will be convinced by that argument, which is kind of a weak argument in my opinion, that it's going to cause the Liberals to really win the next election. But looking at the polls, though, here's a poll from 338 Canada. They are making a surge, and this is an aggregate of a bunch of polls. So this like eliminates part of the effect of outliers. So I know we talked about echoes in a previous episode where it was a kind of a standout poll showing that the Liberals are surging really wildly in support compared to a lot of other polls. But now we're seeing like less of a crazy surge that Echoes projected, but it is definitely kind of statistically significant that the Liberals are making a small surge in the aggregate of polls. So, maybe like this is, again, we alluded to this earlier. This is just maybe people who are like super against Trudeau, who are going to vote for other parties kind of coming back now that Trudeau is gone. Maybe it's less so that they like Mark Carney in particular, and more so that they didn't like Trudeau and now there's no more Trudeau. But the last part of this story I just wanted to dedicate to kind of the age divide in Canada. So I know we talked about this way back in the day, maybe like half a year ago or a year ago in an episode a long time ago, about how the older people, like older folks in Canada, actually vote Liberal more often. And it's the younger people that vote conservative, or at least that's been the trend for the past few years. I don't know how long this trend's been enacted, actually. Maybe it hasn't been that long, but it's just, at least according to the data now, I have this data from 338 Canada, which I think came from Palace data. And Palace is saying that among 18 to 34-year-old Canadians, the Conservatives are polling at 45%. And the Liberals are polling at 21%, and the NDP is polling at 20%. So if you add together both the major two left-leaning parties, Liberals and NDP, it's still less than the people who are supportive of the Conservatives among 18 to 34-year-olds in Canada. But if you go to the 65-year-old plus, so the seniors, you see a totally different story where the Liberals are polling at 48% among people aged 65 and above versus the Conservatives at 31%. So my kind of final little bit of the story tonight is, why do you think that is the case, right? And there's some anecdotal evidence to support this trend as well. So I took a screenshot from Mark Carney's official X account where he bragged about having a packed room in Regina, Saskatchewan, I think this was, where he got like a warm reception from a packed room full of people that are promising to support him and vote for him and all this stuff. And yeah, I pulled this screenshot. This is not photoshopped in any way. I've not made any edits. This is Mark Carney. Mark Carney posted this himself. If you look at around this room, there's maybe like the Asian guy in the back. That's the only guy that I see that could be under the age of like 45. Like, if you just look at everyone else, I don't think there's like a single other person that's really under the age of 40 or 45 in this photo. So this is, again, anecdotal, but this is very like supportive of the Palace data. And because I've seen pictures from Pierre Poilievre's rallies, and they're full of young people, right? Again, like maybe it's just luck, maybe it's anecdotal, but it just seems like to me that the Liberal parties become the party of old people, and which is the opposite of what you would expect, right? You would expect left-leaning progressive parties to be more supported among younger people because that's just the general trend everywhere else in the Western world. But why is Canada so different? So this is kind of the last thing that I wanted to talk about today. What do you think is going on among the kind of age divide among supporters of left versus right, liberal versus conservative in Canada.
Yeah, no, I'll give a snap at it, so to speak, whatever. I think it's just a matter of daily affordability. This is just like a theory. I feel like I could be right or wrong, but this is how I think and interpret the situation. Um, Elder people and older people are from different generations, that being like Gen X, Boomer, etc., so on and so forth. And they most likely have worked for a very long time. They have multiple amounts of assets. They have a lot of money in like different asset classes, have high net worths. They don't really have to worry about a lot of things financially. And with that being the case, I guess they have time to worry about progressive issues. And since they have the time and they don't have to worry about money, it's like uh, a liberal direction for like a lot of the majority of them. This is just theory. And then meanwhile, us younger people, a lot of us are probably still at home renting or can't even afford to buy a house, entering the workforce, struggling to find a job, high grocery prices, so on and so forth. So think in a sense like Pierre is promising to like negate those issues. So people would probably want to vote in a conservative aspect. But if you're someone who's older who has quite a bit of money already, there's more leniency around stuff like that in terms of daily cost of living. So this is probably one of the reasons as to why this sort of divide is happening. Just a theory. Factual, I'm not sure, but just a kind of a spiff out there.
With regards to the age difference, I suspect that it is more so that a lot of the people who have voted liberal in the past are kind of sticking with the liberals, whereas the younger folks, I feel like, are more frustrated than they have been in the past. It's no longer been kind of the same the previous scenario where I think like in like the mid to late 2000s where if you were a young person, things were relatively all right. I would say like people seem to be able to afford housing for the most parts. People were able to get schooling and everything. Whereas I feel like the last 10 years, the people who've been becoming adults during that time frame tend to be a lot more jaded because of the fact that they are looking at things and going, oh, so I'll just never own a house ever. There's just no way. And so they are naturally being encouraged to consider the alternative. And since there's functionally only two parties in Canada, whether you like the NDP or not, the Liberals and the Conservatives are really the main ones. People are going to be going to be more inclined to vote for the Conservatives over the Liberals when they're younger, because they've seen the last 10 years or so of the Liberal leadership and gone basically, wow, this is kind of not very good. And, I am worse off because of this. And so I will be inclined to support the other side, because at the end of the day, things looked like they were better under them, right? Because if you look at like housing when Stephen Harper was in charge versus housing with Justin Trudeau, you can clearly see where one was more affordable than the other. Regardless of how good a job you thought Stephen Harper was doing, I would say you can pretty consistently be like, housing and incomes, we just take those, we look at it, and we can just do the math. It was easier to afford a house then. So I would say that's a contributing factor, is just that the state of the country for the young people who are becoming adults now is very different from, even a few years ago, where I think it made a lot more sense to feel like you would wanted to support the more left-leaning parties, because, socially you'd be more inclined to agree with them, right? Because I think that the most Canadians they don't care about gay marriage or anything like that. They're just like, whatever, cool, let the gays can marry, that's great, I don't care, right? And that was kind of more so like the kind of inclusivity and and stuff, and like people were pretty pro immigration and everything. So I think most people were pretty on board with the more social aspects of the Liberal Party, and then the young people now have basically are really really unhappy with the economic side of the Liberals. So I think that's really where this divide is coming from with that, and I guess with the older folks, it's more that the Liberals were maybe working better for them back in the past, and they don't need to worry so much about that. As Dom was kind of saying, they don't need to worry so much about the financial issues because they aren't nearly as inhibited by the financial issues as well. If you are someone who bought a house for $100,000 that's now worth $1.5 million, maybe you want to keep the gravy train going. And if the Conservatives do something that may increase housing availability, and you're older and you want to be able to sell your nest egg at some point and have move somewhere else. Well, if your nest egg is getting reduced because of the Conservatives increasing housing or anything, then maybe that seems like it would be a negative for you. So I'm just speculating. I don't have the exact reasons, but these are some potential causes for this divide.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that I agree. I mean, I think that the main issue here is the economic angle, and that's clear. Like younger people just younger people have been hurt more by this government than older people have, because older people might be in a more protected situation. They already have their house paid for, they have assets, they have a pension. I think there's also just like philosophically things are changing. Like I do think that post-war welfare state mentality I'm not saying that like welfare states and government services are going to go away, but the way we structure our societies in the post-war era these ideas are starting to die. Like I think that we went through a period of time where leftist governments and the center-left governments in the Western world went off the principle of fixed government but making it bigger, and that became like very prominent in 2020 when they were able to expand budgets. The central banks gave them permission, and they all just like went crazy, and the gravy train actually got ramped up. And I think that philosophically, boomers they want that world that they grew up saving for, the world that they contributed to, the world that they contributed to their pensions, they contributed to their healthcare plans, they expect to get those benefits. And they hear guys like Javier Milei and people like Trump kind of changing the script really quickly, and it's scary. Because I think that these trends that are happening around the world are happening here too. It's happening in Europe. You're actually seeing riots in Europe, and I just think that young people have buyer's remorse, and they have a lack of opportunity, and they feel like they just feel like things aren't going well. And I think that we're living in an era where the younger you are as a voter, the less likely you benefited from this like large institutional structure that governs our society and governs our like entitlement systems and everything. So I think that the young people are just more likely what happened in Argentina, which is a greater, they're suffering from greater economic issues than we are. I'm not trying to make a direct comparison, but the trends are the same. The younger people in Argentina were like, screw this Peronist nonsense that's been like running our country for the last 50 years. It's ruined an entire generation. And I think that's happening in the West. I think that's happening in places like Canada too. And I think people are just like, screw it. I don't want this anymore. Like I hate this system. I hate how high my taxes are. Regulations are becoming more suffocating. Governments are talking about taking away our ability to like freely discuss topics online. They might word it in a nicer way, but there's just like this like regime that this like center left like international policy regime that is very international and not localized. That's very suffocating, and it's really impacting people's lives very negatively. In the bonus episode from a couple of weeks ago, I invoked the World Economic Forum, but I just think that's an example of international like progressivism that actually has a lot of control over our local our local decisions. And there's many other examples of international extra governmental groups that have a lot of control over the policies that take place in individual countries. And I just think that it's more likely that if you're younger, you have buyer's remorse. Even if you enthusiastically supported Trudeau 8 years ago or 9 years ago, you probably have buyer's remorse because you're feeling it. The younger you are, more likely you're feeling it financially.